Hello and welcome to a special edition of A Chat With. And I have a very special guest with me today. Now, just for the sake of making sure that we have transparency here, I am a Pittsburgh Penguin fan going back to the original blue uniforms. And the reason I was because one of my favorite Toronto Maple Leafs was sent to Pittsburgh, Eddie Shack. So it was kind of a Eddie Shack thing, and then I just stuck with the Penguins because I'm a loyal guy if there's nothing else. But anyway, neither here nor there. My guest today is one of the coolest cats, if you're a hockey fan, you'll ever want to meet, especially if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, Karen Olacheski. And he has, I would have to say, the best stocked Toronto Maple Leaf exhibit that is not in a museum on this planet. He has jerseys, as for those of you watching can see behind him. He has sticks. He has chairs. He has a passport, for God's sake. He has shin pads. He has helmets. He has things that will just blow your mind. My guest is also involved with a very cool documentary coming up on Boreas Salmon, which will be released on November the 19th, which we'll talk about as well. My guest, Mark Fera. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, buddy, thanks for having me. Now, listen, I got to be honest with you. Okay, I know that it's been really tough having to put up with the Mario Lemieux and Sidney Crosby Stanley Cup years. And, so it's really been tough to be a Pittsburgh fan, but we did.
Yeah, oh, darn.
We did give you Dubas. So let us know how that works out for you.
Yeah, gee, thanks. Anyway, obviously you are a hockey fan to start with, and your team of choice is the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is a great storied franchise that I think has one of the loyalist fan bases around, because they, to be gentle, they have not had the greatest success playoff hockey wise, but they're always entertaining, win, lose, or draw. For you, what was your draw to becoming a Toronto Maple Leafs fan?
Well, I just thought it was absolutely amazing. And my story is a little bit deeper than the average person, which we'll get into here in a bit. But I thought it was incredible when you would go down to Maple Leaf Gardens as a young man, and the pictures as you'd walk in the hallway would almost stare at you. The history of the team, seeing the black and white photos, not really knowing who they were, but understanding that they had significance when it came to sports. And it was just something that I found amazing. When the national anthem was sung and people were singing it, and it gradually would get louder and louder, especially during a playoff game when sometimes the "Go Leafs Go" chant would start to take over as at the end of the national anthem. Seeing people post their signs. There was a girl, Mandy, that would post down at Maple Leaf Gardens for years. She had signs up there, with every type of drawing and everything you could think of, and it was just the infatuation, the investment with people to this local hockey team that grabbed me at first, for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things that I found as a hockey fan. For me, I remember watching on CBC Foster Hewitt as the play-by-play announcer, and then Bill Hewitt after that. And I can remember watching the games and finally getting an opportunity to go to the games. And I went with a friend of mine, Kevin Shea, who is with the Hockey Hall of Fame. And he took me to my first live game at Maple Leaf Gardens. I'd been to lots of OHA games in Hamilton, where I live, with the Finn Cups and the Red Wings. But the atmosphere drew me. And I found myself going to games by myself. And I would go on game day in the morning, go across the road to the Golden Griddle, grab some food, grab some breakfast, and then I would go and I would stand in the lobby at Maple Leaf Gardens and wait until tickets were released over the course of the day. And then I would get my ticket for the game that night. And the patience always what paid off for me, because I always got exciting hockey. Whether I caught up with Kevin or any of my other friends that happened to be at the games or not, it was always fun. Even though I was by myself, I was never by myself. Is that how you see the fan base?
Well, first of all, you couldn't have gone with a nicer guy. Kevin Shea's a friend of mine, and if there's a nicer human being out there, I haven't met him yet. And
Oh,
Kevin and I
me neither.
done a little bit of work together, and I'm just honored to call him a friend and a great guy and just a good person all around. And he helped me out with a very special thing, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But you know, you're right. It was an event when you went down to a Leaf game. It was an event. It was when you walked in. Wasn't the prettiest place. It wasn't the most fancy place, but it was the place. And when you walked out, when you were walking up the road and you'd see the Maple Leaf Gardens sign, you knew that you were about to enter something that was going to be exciting and ready to go. And you're right, the Maple Leafs, listen, they're not the Montreal Canadiens when it comes to winning championships. They haven't won as many as those guys, and we don't really allow any of their fans in this place for sure. But you know, the good thing is that we have incredible stories, some of them not always good. You know, but it goes right back to the construction of Maple Leaf Gardens and how it was built in such a short period of time when there was no money in the economy. Or it talks about the years when, when you're talking about times during the war and Conn Smythe representing the Maple Leafs representing, the military back in the war days. Like there's a lot of things that kind of carry on. Unfortunately, we do go into the Harold Ballard days where things weren't good and things, just became a bit of a nightmare. But, there was always some good stories tied in there as well. And we often forget about, the fact that we got to see Wendell Clark being drafted as a Maple Leaf and Boria Salming, who Jerry McNamara, who I was lucky enough to have here a couple of weeks ago, literally said in his own words, I believe that Boreas Salming was the best defenseman to ever play in the National Hockey League, and that's including Bob Orr. He said that Boria had the mobility. He could skate backwards. He would block shots, defend. And this is, and to me, there's probably been three true superstars in Toronto Maple Leaf history. One would be Charlie Conacher. The second one would be Boria Salming. And the third one we're witnessing now in Austin Matthews.
I would totally agree with that assessment. And I'm a huge Bobby Orr fan, but I'm also a huge Boreas Salming fan. And for me, he wasn't just a good defenseman; he was a good team man because he had just a presence about him that drew the team, and they just kind of knew it was going to be okay. He's here. Did you get that feeling as well?
Boria was the type of guy that if he wanted to be a professional tennis player, he would have been. He was good at anything that he did. And there's a lot of stories about how like he pretty much invented the six pack. And he would stop at a couple of stations before Maple Leaf Gardens at a local McDonald's and have a couple of Big Macs before a game and still go out and be the first star. His metabolism was that good, but it was not only that. I mean, we called the chicken Swedes back in the 70s, right? They weren't tough enough to come and play in the National Hockey League. There's no way they would survive in the National Hockey League. The 76 Philadelphia Flyers found out a little bit different when Boria comes to town and shows them he not only is he coming to a completely new culture, away from family, away from, so many experiences that he had back home, but he was here to change the game. And he definitely did.
Yeah. Now, for you, did you have an opportunity to meet Boria over his time here?
On one occasion, I did, and it was a distant one. I got to go up and talk to him for about 4 or 5 minutes. It was very, very distant. It's not the meeting that I would have liked to have had, but just listening to him talk. I mean, Boria was Boria. He had that chiseled look. He had that voice that you could hear anywhere, anytime, and you knew exactly who it was.
Exactly. Now you have a deep involvement with the Toronto Maple Leafs going back. Tell us a little bit about that and how you were involved with the team.
So, unfortunately for me, growing up, my first hockey game was in 1983. I was watching the Chicago Blackhawks play the Maple Leafs in a 10-8 game, and Greg Terrion had scored on a penalty shot, and he instantly became my first favorite player. But things would take place a little while later because back then it would be a very safe place for kids to go. They would talk about the church, they would talk about hockey arenas where kids would go and they would be safe. Unfortunately for me and several others, I was a victim of the Maple Leaf Gardens sex scandal. Unfortunately, one of the ushers, John Paul Roby, many people knew him, who worked traditionally in the end reds right above where the visiting team would come out, would convince me to come down to the Gardens on several occasions. And I was sexually molested and abused as a young boy. And so my memories in certain aspects were either amazing, spending time in the stands with my dad in section 67, row F, seats 1 and 2, or I was a scared youngster who was just hoping to get the stuff that John Paul Roby had promised me, which probably subconsciously contributes to this. I was promised a lot of stuff from John Paul Roby, and he never came through with anything. But as a young man, so easily influenced, you would go down to the gardens with the hopes, what am I going to get? What am I going to finally get? And my dad had brought home my very first game used item, which was in fact a Greg Terrion game used stick. And I had cards galore. And I was so excited at the fact that, this isn't, a Dan Dow's second year card that my friends all have at school. This is something that player actually used in that game. So over time, I would gradually start to use my cards to turn into memorabilia. And it's kind of taken off to where the sickness has gotten us all today. For anybody who collects game used stuff, we call it our sickness. But it definitely affected me. It took me a long time to adjust, to grow up to. Literally just got married 2 months and 1 week ago now. So at 50 years old,
Very cool.
I was able to enjoy that. But there was a lot of tough times that came out of this. And a lot of lack of trust, a lot of abandonment of friendships and opportunities. And I've met a lot of great people, but I just was in a different place, and I just wasn't able to do things at that point. And it's taken a lot of work. Unfortunately, I'll never be a biological dad due to that type of stuff happening. But the good thing is that I'm a stepdad to two pretty cool girls now.
And I am so happy to see you looking like you do. You've got a smile. You've overcome, and it's something that you and I have in common. Mine was with a friend who I thought I could trust, and to this day, it's still kind of difficult to talk about, as I can imagine it is for you as well. But again, I've learned to trust. I've learned to overcome. But it was a long time in getting there, and congratulations that you've gotten there to the point you are now. But with that being said, let's move on to something more cheerful, a little more happy. Let's talk about the room.
Okay.
Now, I see a pile of jerseys. I see tons of sticks. How many sticks are up there?
We haven't counted, but I know that there's 53 Austin Matthews alone. So we've got everything from the stick that Andy Bathgate would use to score the game-winning goal in the 1964 Stanley Cup in Game 7. We've got Timmy Horton, Frank Mahovlich, a bunch of Davey Keons, and just about every big star, Wendell, Dougie, everybody you can imagine, we've gotten in here. I would say that there's probably close to 200 sticks now, 253 jerseys. We can't obviously display them all, and it actually takes over a few rooms. So it's not just the one room here. It's actually the entire basement. Thank God my wife hasn't given me too hard of a time, and she understands what I'm trying to do, which, getting back to our point briefly, is that the whole purpose of me doing this is to help raise awareness for boys that have been sexually abused, right? So that's kind of, if you're a young woman that's been sexually abused, it's a horrific story, but you have a lot of people and a lot of avenues for help. But as a young boy, you still don't have that. And you and I talking, this conversation takes place a lot more for me now, with the amount of people coming out and really using that opportunity as an avenue to talk about it. So I'm glad that you've brought that up, and this is something that should be even more of a topic down the road on your show.
You know what? I will make that arrangement with you. We could talk off air, and we'll make that arrangement, and we will have a very special edition of the show just for that topic.
Mm.
And I would be honored to be able to talk to you about that. But moving on to the room again, I see the Bobby Orr jersey to your right behind you.
Okay.
Remember, how do you get those jerseys?
You remember Nothing But Leafs. That's Red Kelly's All-Star sweater.
Well, that's Red Kelly's.
Yeah, that actually would have been worn by 4 players, but the only one we really want to recognize is Red Kelly, because the other players were not Leafs. And back then, it was about the Stanley Cup champions playing the All-Stars. So we're going to kind of take a little bit of a walk around. I do apologize.
Please do.
We are under construction here a little bit. We're doing some documenting and trying to stay on top of things here. So as we kind of go around, we'll start right over here. This is kind of my more famous row here, where I'm not sure how well you can see it, but we've got Red Kelly, Bobby Bond, Bronco Horvath. This is attributed to him. We're not 100% sure about that one, but we've got Frank Mahovlich, Alan Stanley, Davey Keon. We've got Ron Ellis. The cool thing about this Ron Ellis sweater is that it was actually found with a former player with the Tulsa Oilers, and they were the farm team of the Maple Leafs back then. And when he was playing with the team, they found a box, opened the box. Here's Leaf shirts because they were hand-me-downs. He quickly grabbed one, tucked it in his bag, brought it home, and was actually out painting his house in this. And this jersey is photographed and matched to the Stanley Cup presentation in 1967. So it's the only Stanley Cup presentation. Basically, photo matched is when you have a picture with markings of that actual jersey, where you can see the markings on that picture that are on that jersey. So that's photo match. That's like the highest level of authenticity you can get.
Exactly.
So speaking of your favorite player, this is Eddie Shack. This would be potentially the last jersey he would wear in the National Hockey League. Ted Kennedy, Rudy Miguel. There's one up in the top there that we think could be George Armstrong and Tim Horton. They both would wear the same number when they come up, which would be 20. And then back then, players would have to ask or be honored to wear the players. So Tim Horton would wear Clancy's number 7 once he was given permission and the honor of wearing it. And we know George Armstrong would wear number 10 after Sil Apps. So, you know, those players would go after them. And there's Daryl Sittler's jersey. This is Daryl's from the 5-goal night in the playoffs against Philadelphia in '76. And then we've got a couple of Jimmy Thompsons from back in the early 50s. Lanny McDonald. There's Dave Tiger Williams' last jersey. Ricky Vive. Wendell Clark down on the bottom. That's got 57 repairs, 4 fight straps in it. Dougie Gilmore's last jersey that he would wear in Maple Leaf Gardens. Matt Sundin. And here's kind of 2 really cool ones that I like. So we've got here Bernie Perrant and Jacques Plante. And so that's both the players from, so that would be from the 71-72 playoffs. And
right.
Plante stick in the background. And going back up, if you look above me, these are all the kind of the bunch of the sticks that we have. I put them up top because first of all, it gets them out of the way. And secondly, it keeps people from handling them all the time. So these are where we put some of the more important sticks up there. So there's 4 goalies. There's another Jacques Plante here. And in the back is Johnny Bauer. And then over the side there is Terry Sawchuk. And then we've got Turk Broda up in here. And so, you know, on this side, we've also got a pair of the red seats. These are the original red seats from the floor. And the floor in Maple Leaf Gardens was actually green when it started. It wasn't, most people don't realize that. And we confirmed it because I've got 3 of the 4 team benches in here, which also have been used for decades. And you could see the original green paint underneath those benches as well. So there would be 4 benches, 2 home and 2 away. So I've got 3 of the 4 of those, but these would be the seats that would be in Maple Leaf Gardens. A lot of people didn't realize that. These would be used from 1931 to 1962. So then became the more traditional gold, red, green, blue, and gray that we would know when we would go down to the Gardens. But before that, they actually had original seats from earlier on. Now, my favorite player, for people that know me, is Austin Matthews. I'm a huge Austin Matthews fan. I just think from day one, this guy is a very, very special talent. And so I've kind of gone a little bit crazy with the Austin stuff. This is the largest Austin Matthews collection. I've got several of there's his 2 rookie sweaters over there, rookie season sweaters. And we've got his gloves and helmets going right back to his national development camp. We've got some Sundin and some Nylander and some Marner stuff mixed in there as well. And then down here, I've got a table kind of completely dedicated to Austin Matthews, including his 4-goal helmet, a couple of his rookie helmets, and there's a bunch of his sticks in there. I think there's 16 sticks in there as well. So we've got that. And then as we make our way into the second room, and I'm going to save the last room till the end here, but we've got some of the original drawings from Maple Leaf Gardens. That would be the original drawing from the sign that hung out in front of Maple Leaf Gardens. There's Mitchie Marner's sweater from the Centennial Classic. And then we've got other drawings and other stuff like the ticket takers and puck holders, the tape holders and water bottle holders from the Gardens. And then as we go around, you'll see this is all Austin Matthews stuff right back from when he played in Switzerland. That's the full outfit. That's his full rookie outfit from when he played in Switzerland.
Wow.
So when he was the leading scorer in Switzerland, so everybody else would be wearing this blue sweater. He'd be wearing this, would stand out like a sore thumb. And then it goes right back to his early years. These are all his gloves, his pants. That's the pants from his 4-goal game. Gloves, sticks, skates. This is probably his most dominant sweater that he had, where he'd wear it for a total of, I believe, 9 games. He'd have 2 hat tricks, 2 2-goal games. And then going back over to the St. Pat's in the back, you see the Arenas outfit that he would wear when he got suspended for cross-checking Darlene. And then going right back to his rookie development camp stuff. So it is
Wow.
quite a bit of stuff in here for Matthews. Like I said, I'm a huge fan. I do know that he knows of this, so I'm really happy with that.
That
Uh,
answered that question.
yeah, hoping to get him over here. This is
Now,
Ricky.
before
Yeah,
you go into the final corner that we're going to talk about,
yeah,
save that corner for last if you don't mind. Continue
yeah,
on. Sorry.
yeah, for sure. So this is Ricky Vive's 50-goal stick from the first 50 goals in team history, along with his puck from the first, second, and third 50-goal season. And then below this would be Daryl Sittler's stick from the 10-point game. He would use that stick for the first and second period, which was never to believe to be seen. It was believed to have been burnt in a fire. Some of you might recognize these pictures. These hung in Maple Leaf Gardens.
The king.
Yeah, back in the day. If you get a chance to listen, this is Rick Vive's sweater here, and Jerry McNamara just did an interview, a very interesting one about what actually took place with Rick losing the C. As Rick has told everybody, he fell asleep for practice, slept in. Jerry McNamara has the actual story on what actually took place. So,
Wow.
very, very interesting. There's Matt Sundin's sweater from when he would score the one goal that would put him as the leader in goals and points in Toronto Maple Leaf history. And then in here, actually, believe it or not, here's a barber chair. The barber chair was a demand of Conn Smythe, being a military guy, would demand that his players be clean cut and shaven for every game. So that would cut the greatest of the greats' hairs. So it's kind of neat you can only imagine the stories in our barber chair, what happened back then. And then
No kidding.
back behind me, you'll see Stanley Cups that were given to players. There's the puck back here. That puck right there is the one that Bobby Bond would use to score the game-winning goal on a broken foot in 1964. And then we've got Ted Kennedy's Stanley Cup trophy. We've got the J.P. Bickle Award. Very, very, very rare award given out by the Maple Leafs. A good friend of mine, Graham McLaughlin, is the relative of Bickle, and that's an extremely rare find there. And then we've got Stanley Cup rings and trophies and cigar boxes and stuff like that. A lot of this is out right now, which is great. There's the Foster Hewitt's microphones from calling the first game.
Wow.
In hockey history, along with a flask that he used to carry in his pocket. And then we've got two other rooms. I know there's a couple of displays that you want to see here, but here's a picture of what would hang in Maple Leaf Gardens that you would see in Maple. About here's a couple. I've got a couple of the trunks from the Maple Leafs that they would use to transport the equipment back in the 30s, with Sittler's helmet and glove and Lindros's gloves. And then here's Timmy Horton's bag. There's another player's bag, but on the top is Tim Horton's bag from the 1966 to 68 season. And then over here's that's the original team picture from 1931-32 that would hang in the garden. Their first Stanley Cup. Up in the corners, the first program in Maple Leaf history from their first game, Maple Leaf Gardens. The second one would be their first Stanley Cup, and then below that's the autographs from that team.
Nice.
Down here is Conn Smythe's chair from his office, along with one of the only known documents from the St. Pat's team that we would see. Very, very rare stuff. And on this side, this is the net that Johnny Bauer would protect for 13 years before he would become a Maple Leaf, playing for the Cleveland Barons. And so it was amazing to have his family here, John Jr. and become really good friends with Cynthia, his daughter, and those are his skates, and that's his catcher. And then you've got the other likes of Grant Fuhr and Felix Potvin and Eddie Belfour, and then you've got Mike Palmetier, the Popcorn Kid, over here. So, and there's Harrison's mask from the 70s that he would wear. Again, very rare. In the background, you'll see a couple of banners that are in the back there.
The ones that were up in the rafter?
That's correct. So you've got Charlie Conacher's, George Armstrong's, and I've also got Turk Broda's. So yeah, so some rare stuff, but there are two items in particular. There's Cujo's equipment from his last professional win. That's his catcher blocker jersey and pads from his last pro win, along with some other stuff. Again, this is a bit messy right now. There's there's about 3,000 items in total here.
Wow. Now we have one more display we want to take a look at. And as we do that, let's talk about what else is going on with you. And that is working with a great 6-part documentary on Boreas Salmi. Tell us a little bit about that and show us some of the stuff that you have.
Absolutely. There's two more things I'm going to want to show you. I don't even know if you know that I have one of them, but we'll talk about that one in a second. Okay. So this
You're
year,
on.
this is the Borea Salming display that I've put together, just in honor of one of the greatest players in National Hockey League history, and our hero, really, in what he did
I would
to
agree.
change the game. Change the game. I would think, I don't often describe hockey players as heroes. I would describe him as a hero because he gave opportunity for people to come and have a better life, to play in the National Hockey League and show them that he could do that and do it well. And so, there was a couple other players, but he and Inge Hammerstrom came over together, and I know that Jerry McNamara wanted to sign other players, but he would come over and literally change the game. And so, right from the moment they came to Toronto, Jerry McNamara was, a lot of people doubted his finds in these two players, and because none of them had seen them play. So for him to recognize these players and bring them over was a very special moment for sure.
Yeah, now we've got about 8 minutes to go before we have to kill this off.
Mhm.
Before we go to the documentary, how much would you say time-wise you have spent gathering all this cool stuff?
Um, it's been a lifetime. It's been something I've spent a
So
lifetime on.
since teen years, would you say?
Yeah.
And I
No.
would just
Yeah, I would
were
say,
you
yeah,
able
I
to
would
get
say, since my mid-teens, 14, 15 is when I started getting into that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I didn't have a lot of it until I got into probably my late 20s, my 30s. I had about 200,000 sports cards, and that's when I started trading and getting into a lot of this, kind of going
and
from
I
there.
see the Bill Barilko fuselage behind you as well, which we'll talk about last.
Mhm.
But you've got the documentary coming out on the 19th. Tell us a little bit about that and how you were involved. And
So
you
it's
were involved.
Yeah, so it's going to be a 6-part series. Viaplay brought out a lot of new technology and really wanted to take this one to the next level. And I know it's going to be coming out in Sweden in the next a couple of weeks here. I think it's the 19th that it'll be premiering there. And it's not just a hockey story; it's a love story about Bori and the love for his family, a love for his wife, and the challenges that he would overcome just to try and provide and make a better living for his family. You got to keep in mind, right? These guys a lot of them were treated like circus acts. When you think about it, you would play your game, you'd be back on a train, or you'd be back on a bus, or, and Ballard was pretty cheap. So they didn't exactly have planes for every opportunity then. So, they weren't treated very well. Boria was well liked, but, coming in, having to deal with that and going through obviously the turmoil of taking, I think it was 256 stitches to his face,
I remember that.
yeah, and then taking a stick to the face as well, to the eye. He faced a couple of very significant injuries that are brought up in this series as well. And it's just Jason Priestley, who's our homegrown talent from 90210. I had the chance to meet him, and I'm telling you, if he loves the game of hockey, he loves the history of it. And my direct involvement was that originally they were coming to Canada to do the Canadian portion. It was very short timing, and they wanted to try and nail the props and the uniforms and everything as good as possible. So I was able to give them exact jerseys from those eras, from that time period, and so they could really nail it. And in the documentary, a lot of the props there are from my collection. So I was very honored to have that. And you know what? I was really honored at the end because they did a couple of really nice things for me. In the end, I'll be a referee. I don't know if you'll see me much in there, but I'm a referee. They had asked me to be a referee down there, and I was honored enough that they made a jersey with my name on it. So just myself and the producer, he would put his name on the other referee, and I would have my name on. So it was a big honor for me. They gave me the shirt that the actor would wear for Boria in the film. They custom made me a 67 ring. Like, the honor was just incredible. The people that put it together, the effort that went into it. And keep in mind, this is all during COVID, was extremely challenging. So I was honored to be a part of trying to manipulate what Maple Leaf Gardens would look like on the screen and stuff like that. So it was a great involvement.
Well, we're starting to run a little short on time. Have you got a few more minutes?
I do.
So what do you say we take a break, and then
Okay.
we'll come back and we'll talk some more? Sound good?
Absolutely.
All right, you are listening to a very special edition of A Chat with Mark Fera, and we're going to take a quick 1-minute break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the documentary and the Bill Barilko display and more. So stick around, kids. We'll be right back with A Chat with. Welcome back to A Chat With, and we have a very special edition of A Chat With going with Toronto Maple Leaf super fan and historian Mark Fera. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about the Boreas Salming documentary, and we were looking at some of the memorabilia, and you were telling us about the making of the documentary, and it's a 6-part series. What era does it look at for Borea?
Well, I mean, it goes Sweden, and it works its way right up towards the mid '80s. I guess would be it's his entire time in Toronto. Doesn't really get too much into the post time that I'm aware of that my involvement took place in. But to my understanding, it just goes up to right in and around the time the 1985 era would be roughly the way I understood it.
Now, for Boreas Salming, as we've mentioned earlier, we felt that he was a real team player, a real team man. He was one of the ultimate Maple Leafs, one of the greatest defensemen of all time. And that's putting him in some very cool company with some very good defensemen. So that is speaking very, very highly of a guy who worked very hard to be as good as he was. It wasn't just that it just sort of fell to him. He worked at what he did and was very good at what he did. I wonder why he was never named captain of the team. Was it something he just didn't want?
He rejected it. So Jerry McNamara admits when he was here, he said we offered Borea the captaincy. He didn't want it at the time, and Borea publicly mentions that later on, and he mentions how he truly regrets never becoming captain of the team. I guess at the time, after watching the Rick Five, the way things were handled there, the way things were handled with Sittler, perhaps he just didn't want to go down that road again and kind of put himself in that position. Some guys like to be named the supervisor until they see how the last supervisor was treated and don't want to be a part of that. And perhaps that was just Boreas' choice. He just didn't want to go down that road and put himself in that vulnerable position. And I don't think that many people really, ever looked at him as anything but their captain. When you looked at what that guy did on the ice, that's where he did his talking. He didn't really need a captaincy on his shirt to be the true leader of that team. And the other thing that we often forget to talk about too, right? When you're talking about Boreas Salming and you look at the assists that he put up in his career, and he only ever played at any given time at the most with 3 Hall of Famers. And that was, you're including Dave Keon, who was coming towards the end, not the end of his career, but, he certainly wasn't in his 60s prime when Borea got to play with him. So you're talking about Sittler and McDonald. When you look at other players, and we just have to talk about Bobby Orr, look at the Hall of Famers that he had to play with. We talk about Nick Lidstrom. Well, Nick Lidstrom, some of these guys were playing with 10, 11 Hall of Famers on their team. They didn't have to do the same, the same work that Salming did every single day. And, and through frustrating times, through some really challenging times, with coaching changes and, the whole circus around John Brophy, which players just absolutely did not like at all. They loved Dan Maloney as their coach, and he wanted to stay, but Ballard wanted Brophy really, really bad. And I think that was becoming the end of the opportunity that the Salming era Maple Leafs had a chance at winning. They had some great talent around Borea. The Russ Courtnall, the Damfuses, the Lehmans, the Clarks, the Iafrades. All those guys were fantastic hockey players, and unfortunately they were the team wasn't allowed to be properly coached. Jerry McNamara was never allowed to hire his coach. And so it created all kinds of problems.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I respect highly about Boreas Salming. All that turmoil going on around him and around the team, and he just went about his business. He didn't pipe up about anything. He didn't rant. He didn't go off on the situation. He'd show up, work hard, do his job, do the best that he could, and it showed. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Leaf fans were such fan favorites, because for him it was all about the game, not about the turmoil around the game.
Absolutely. I mean, in Toronto, we're kind of guilty sometimes of always falling in love with the little hardworking guy, and we've often overlooked whether it be Frank Mahovlich, Matt Sundin. Some people still to this day overlook Austin Matthews as well, because when you look at the little guys that work all the time, you fall in love with them. And Boria wasn't a small guy, but he had a work ethic that just is very rarely unmatched. And it wasn't even as much about the work ethic. That guy would put everything he had. Like when we look at his shin pads over here, let's look at these shin pads, for example. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that would literally, most guys, like, there's not an NHL in the world, that would be wearing these things today. They're taped top to bottom. He's removed padding on the inside and modified padding to make them lighter. Well, back in the day, he was trying to make his equipment lighter, while other guys were trying to, today are adding extra padding for blocking shots, right? And
Yeah.
they shot the puck hard back then too. I mean, Ali Afraidy was breaking 100 with a wooden stick. So it's definitely a very special time in Maple Leaf history, and a player that, for anybody who got to see him, he was extremely special.
Yeah, and now there's another Toronto Maple Leaf we haven't talked about that is kind of a point of discussion a lot, and that's Paul Henderson. As you and I speak, this weekend coming, the 12th and 13th is Hall of Fame weekend in Toronto. Well, of course, the Toronto Maple Leaf game on the weekend, as well as the Hall of Fame game. But it's Hall of Fame weekend, and a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf fans are really bitter about the fact that Paul Henderson is not in the Hall of Fame. Do you feel that he needs to be in the Hall of Fame to establish his career, or do you feel that he has done well all on his own and doesn't need the extra accolade that he gets as a Hall of Famer? Are you there? I lost you there.
Yeah, I'm here, but I kind of lost you for a second. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that the discussion about Paul Henderson as a Hall of Famer, not a Hall of Famer, do you feel that's an accolade that Paul Henderson needs to establish his legacy as a hockey player, or do you feel that the entire package, including 72, sets his legacy as he was a good player and he worked hard? And do you feel that he needs that validation or deserves it even?
Debatable on who's in and who's out, and who should be in and who should be out. But I mean, Paul Henderson and Team Canada are in there for 72, and anytime you talk about Paul Henderson, that's what you're going to know him for. And having that one moment, I mean, he certainly was a heck of a hockey player. Not a Hall of Famer in my opinion, and not necessarily based on one goal. I mean, you're looking behind me at the Bill Barocco exhibit. There's a young man that was 24 years old, 4 Stanley Cups, scores the winner, and the Hall of Fame's views on him not getting in the Hall of Fame is that he just didn't have enough time in the National Hockey League. Where I kind of look at it a little differently, and I say,
yeah, I kind of do too, because like it's not like he had a choice.
Right.
His life was taken. It wasn't a matter of he just said, "Okay, I'm Barry Sanders. I'm done."
Yeah.
His life was taken. I think that there needs to be a special consideration, and I would agree with you that if somebody does deserve to be in, he is one of those people.
Yeah, it's the greatest story in Toronto Maple Leaf history. It's the
Yeah,
greatest.
and with that, what do you say we take a look at the display and talk about it a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So many people know that know me know that my biggest and proudest honor in everything we've got here is what sits behind me, and that's the Bill Barocco exhibit. This contains here's the parts of the fuselage. I have the motor, the engine, and the one of the big pontoons in at my office, because obviously we can't fit everything down here, but eventually it'll all be coming together. And as you can see right here, that would be the seat that Bill Barocco's body would lay in for 11 years until they would find it just after winning their next Stanley Cup in 1962. And it was often called the Bill Barocco curse, because the Maple Leafs were expected to win more Stanley Cups and in fact didn't. And so they called it the curse. And it wasn't until 1962 the Maple Leafs would finally win their next Stanley Cup. And literally just a few weeks later, they would find the wreckage. And there's a lot of stuff in here. It really contains quite a bit. Lyrics handwritten by Gord Downey for the 50 mission cap that was presented to Anne at Center Ice at Maple Leaf Gardens in 2001 to celebrate the 50th anniversary. There's another copy of that right in the Maple Leafs dressing room, actually, which there was one presented to the Maple Leafs that I got to see a couple of weeks ago. And then down below, you'll see right down in here, that's the actual pilot logbook from when Ron Boyd would find the plane. There's two different stories on who actually found the plane. I'm going with the Ron Boyd story. It just lines up a little bit more for me, and just happened to be flying over doing a routine flight and saw some a wreck in the bush, and actually took toilet paper, threw it out the window back then to represent that would basically be like their GPS, their marking system back in the day. And so as you can see up here, a different
We're just having a couple of technical difficulties with Mark Fera at the moment, and we are taking a look at the Bill Barocco exhibit. And just for me, that is such an important piece of history. And I'm so honored that somebody who loves the team like you do has that exhibit. Now, speaking of the exhibit and other exhibits that you have there, do you have opportunity to go sometimes and take the displays out and show them in public?
That's the goal. The long-term goal is to be able to take this out, talk about my story, and continue with education on the kids. Right now, we have quite a few coming through. Obviously, I have to be careful when bringing through my personal.
Yeah, it seems we've lost Mark, and I'm going to try and get him back. And in the meantime, we want to remind you that the documentary will be on the 19th via Play in Sweden. If you speak Swedish and happen to have that app, be sure and check it out. It's going to be a great documentary, and it will be coming to Canada at some point very soon. So be sure and check it out. And Mark, welcome back. We got you back. We were talking about the possibility of you taking it out as a display in the public at some point. Do you have a timeline for that? Like when you would like to start that?
Well, I've been taking some stuff out to schools now. I do some talks at schools, and always open to bringing it out and showing the kids, and they're fascinated with some of the old history. Eventually, what I would love to do is be able to do a traveling exhibit, but of course that takes time setting up and money and costs involved, and so we're working on that. And it's a big goal for us to try and do to try and keep the story alive. I really feel that the team itself could be doing a lot better on providing more history with the team. And I know we had really rough reception in the other room there, and I'm gonna have to change my internet provider here real soon. Here, for those of you who get a chance to have a look at that, this is one of the most honored pieces that I can have on display here, and this is actually the puck that Bill Barocco scored that goal with in 1951. So,
Dang.
and this actually tied into Hamilton. This actually was sat in the Wellington Street pub. For those of you who might have remembered the Wellington Street pub, it was around for over 100 years. And the Donahue family, Jerry Senior, who owned the pub, actually had season's tickets for the Leafs. And this was an incredible story because the Hockey Hall of Fame thought they had the puck the whole time, and they weren't doing anything spiteful. But back then, the Hall of Fame would work on a handshake with things. You'd bring them something, you'd say, this is the Bill Barocco puck, and they would take your word for it. And things change a little bit. And so the Hall of Fame thought they actually had the puck that was the Barocco puck until the Donahue family, came out of Hamilton. So no, we have the puck. We've had it since the actual game. My dad My dad Harry actually went to the game, and this is Dan Donahue, and who the three brothers who are very good friends and great people, very classy and respectful people, had approached me with the story and have privileged me, allowing me to put this in to this collection and displaying it with with the plane, which is incredible. And salt of the earth people, and they came out and said, we have the puck, and but how do we prove it? And so there was some investigating taking place where we found a picture of a picture was found. It wasn't by myself, but a picture was found, and it turned out that the puck that the Hall of Fame thought they had, in fact, wasn't the same puck, and in fact, that puck hadn't been used in almost 9 years. So that puck with, like, the logo on the puck was different from the one they used in 51, 52. They were able to zoom in on a picture of the goal after it happened and determine that, in fact, this is the same logo. And so during COVID, we did an article celebrating the 70th anniversary of the goal, and it came out in the Hamilton Spectator, and we did a radio show. And it just so happened that the radio show in the afternoon, after the morning, the paper article came out, the gentleman in the air said, I've got something really important that's going to help you guys out. Now, Harry and his brother Jerry Jr. went with their father to the game. There was three of them, but Jerry Sr. didn't drive. So he had a driver who would drive him around in a beautiful big Buick. And the stuff that Jerry did for the community was incredible, especially during times of depression, making sure gardens were growing for them so they had food, helping to pay rent. He was a huge person in Hamilton and helping people out for many, many years and many decades. And so the gentleman had called in the show and said, I can validate this story. My dad was actually the driver who took them down to the game that night. And our jaws just dropped. And so I immediately, after that interview, set up Zoom meetings with everybody where their stories absolutely lined up. And so the driver had taken them down to the game. He went down to the ice level with Harry. So Harry could jump over the boards, and they wanted to make sure he wouldn't get any trouble. Someone offered him $5 for, I think it was $5 for the puck at the end of the game, and he refused it. And they brought it back home, and it was, this trophy was made for it, and it sits on the trophy ever since. And it sat in their living room. The boys took it and rolled it in the basement. It almost fell in the sewer a couple times in the basement. Almost sold at garage sales, and here we are with. We've got probably three of the most historic pucks in Toronto Maple Leaf history. When you think about the Bill Barocco goal, which to me is the biggest, and then you've got the Bobby Bond goal, and you've got Rick Vive's first 50 goal puck. There's a lot of significant history here. And so I'm very honored not only to have this stuff, but the friends, right? Like me talking to you and everybody. It's been fantastic.
And I'm enjoying this. And I got to tell you, I'm going to do this right on air. I don't care. I'm the station manager. What am I going to do? Fire me? But I want to put out an invitation to you right now. February the 18th, we are doing a charity hockey game for U.S. and Canadian military charities. The Canadian charity is Canadian Heroes, and the American charity is Serve Niagara, which helps with U.S. war veterans for food, shelter, that sort of thing. Incredible. And the Buffalo Sabre Warriors, sorry, it's not a Toronto Maple Leaf team, but the Buffalo Sabre Warriors will be coming to take on the KPHR No Stars in Caledonia, Ontario. If you are able and you are willing, I would love for you to bring some of your stuff to Caledonia and display it in the lobby so that the people can see the history that is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and give them an opportunity to talk to you, ask you questions if you wish. So I would like to put that out to you right now. Would you consider it?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, that's what the whole goal is here. So absolutely. So we'll chat after. We'll get some of the details, and we'll kind of maybe see if we can help utilize this with maybe an angle of making more money for that particular charity. Because again, this is all about charity for me. And as I've talked to the other people that have allowed me to take this on, is to is to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And that's a great cause. It's a fantastic cause. So of course I'd be more than ecstatic to help out with that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know Carrie Goulet
Yes.
from Stop Concussions. We are doing a show the night before with a stand-up comedian and an Elvis tribute artist that we'll be doing, and we'll be displaying the jerseys. I'll send you a mock-up of the jersey so you can see it. And I know it's not a Toronto Maple Leaf thing, but would you accept one of our jerseys as a gift for your shrine?
100%.
You're on.
100%. It's all about the story, buddy, and it's all about. Listen. I've had a lot of challenges, and I've taken the long route, and we've got it. But you know, for me to think about the friendships and the people that I've met along the way, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, right? So how can
Yeah, is it so true or what? Like
yeah,
hockey and rock and roll are the two for me that, and I was a football player my entire adult life, but hockey and rock and roll have for me have given me the best friends that I've made in my entire career, and I am so honored that I've had an opportunity to meet some of the people that I've met, including you. Um, there is such love shown with that stuff, and I can't believe you have over 200 hockey sticks. I had in the past done some charity hockey games and that, and I did one for the Tim Horton Children's Foundation. And Kevin Shea was invited to play, but unfortunately couldn't play that day. But he has had his jersey, and if you ever have a chance to see that jersey, it's a blue and white jersey on purpose
wow,
because I wanted it to be the Toronto Maple Leafs.
yeah,
And what we did was I gave the jersey to Kevin. Kevin put it in the Hockey Hall of Fame, so my jersey made it to the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I am so honored that he did that, and it just I can't do enough. I love the game of hockey. I love the sport of hockey. I played hockey until I couldn't anymore. Played shinny all the time, and I just loved it. And it for me, it is what it is. One of the greatest things there is.
it is. It's just a great way for us to celebrate and get together as people, and it allows you to be a kid again. You know, that's what we often forget. Life is so serious with all the day-to-day challenges and COVID and just just challenging times that everybody faces, that sport and hockey in general, it just allows you to get together, celebrate, become one, and get behind something, and become a group, right? And during COVID, everybody was so distant with each other that it's fantastic to see groups coming back together again, and people hopefully really appreciating what we have now that was briefly taken away from us. And it's nice. It's really nice. I go down to the games, and I see people when I do get down there, and people will walk up, and I had a gentleman the other day. I went to go meet with a couple of sticks, and he wanted me to add these sticks here. And when I met with him, he said, "I want to tell you a story." He said, "You really inspire me with what you went through, and so much so that I wanted to come out about mine. I want to talk to some people about my history, and I've been sexually abused too." So this has happened, I would say 15, 20 times since I've come out about it. And so it's amazing that it's a small change, but I'm very fortunate that these people want to share that with me. They trust me, and they've given me a big chance to learn. And so I'm very, very fortunate for that. Very lucky person.
So now let's have a little fun, you and I, okay? I've
Okay.
got a story, and I want you to think up a good story too, okay? You
Okay.
ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
My favorite memory of Maple Leaf Gardens is for my birthday, which is in April.
Mhm.
Kevin Shea, our buddy, he got me as a gift 2 gold tickets to a Toronto Maple Leafs game,
Wow.
and we went to this game together. Where the fun came in was it wasn't just the game and the atmosphere. It was Kevin Shea and I sitting, and he told me about a project that he was working on for Attic Music Group at the time when he was working with them.
Mhm.
And what he was working on was a series, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, called Contact,
Mhm.
which was basically music that you would hear at a sporting event, such as a hockey game.
Okay.
Pump It Up as an example, the hockey song, and what he had was these various CDs that had all these great hits that you would hear at a hockey game.
Mhm.
And the fun for me was sitting there at the game and him and I bouncing songs off each other. This would be a great song. That would be a great song. Then the PA, the music guy would play something on the PA system, and we'd look at each other and go, "That's a good song. That's a good song. This is a good song." And when the CD came out, not that I contributed anything to it. I don't want that to be misunderstood. I did not contribute anything other than annoying Kevin all night with our banter. Songs that we talked about were on that disc. And for me, that was one of the coolest things that I can wrap myself around with the Toronto Maple Leafs and Maple Leaf Gardens. That's my story. What's yours?
Well, mine, listen, after I got to a certain age where um, I knew things that were going wrong with John Paul Roby, I was starting to get the gist of it. I was too scared to come out and talk to anybody, but I still, the odd time, would still get into the Gardens because I was a very recognized face by people working the door, and people that had been there had seen my face. I was a young kid, and it was actually the last day that I went, and it was after that Chris Broadhurst said, "Okay, you're going to have to leave now, and you're not going to be, we can't have you back. You need to go to school, right?" And I remember that, and that was in '93, and I was actually 20 years old. I was going to university at the time, and that's where he asked me, he said, "Shouldn't you be in school or working?" And I said, "Well, I'm in college today," and this is how many years I was going down there for, and so there was no abuse taking place at that time. It was past that time, but I was still, once in a while I'd go down to the Gardens, and so I had brought a friend down with me in that particular day, who recently just found out about the abuse, and at my wedding, and wanted to wring my neck for never talking about it because he was blown out of the water that had taken place. And so I'm sitting down on the bench, and sitting down the Golds, the first row Golds, right behind the Maple Leaf bench, and in that, in one end is Grant Fuhr, and in the other is Felix Potvin. And I'm sitting there with my hands over the rail like this, and Pat Burns is sitting right in front of me watching practice. And Cliff Fletcher comes walking down and sits right in front of me, and stands right in front of me, and the two of them begin to talk. And I can hear the conversation clear as day, that Fletcher comes down and wants to know if Pat Burns thinks that the kid can take over the job. And it was just after that the trade was made, and Grant Fuhr was sent to Buffalo for Dave Anderchuk, who become a very key member of this team, as you know. And it just so happens, I don't know whether it's spiritually how all of these pieces have found their way here. The Barocco, if you see, there's 150 pieces there, and a lot of them have found their way here. It's incredible, and it's really amazing that I was able to find the two jerseys that those players would have worn at that exact time, in those games during that portion of the season, and be able to reunite them for my greatest memory, on the positive side, that I could have thought of, and just sitting there listening, literally being allowed to be the fly on the wall, and listening to two hockey legends in Pat Burns, who was just a dominant figure. Of anytime you would see him there, I always say him and Lou Lamoriello are the two that when they walk in a room, I was scouting with the Atlanta Thrashers, or helping, scouted with them for a few years before they became part of the Winnipeg Jets. I remember being in the media room and Lou Lamoriello walking in, and this was when he was with New Jersey. When he walked in, the whole room just went silent. There was just an aura, and it was the same thing with Pat Burns. He just demanded that kind of respect, and so, to see those conversations taking place, and knowing that I actually got to listen to it, that was something pretty special.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Through hockey, I had an opportunity to actually have dinner with Scotty Bowman. I was covering a game for a radio station I was working at, and was down in the media room. And I was there, and you know how they have all the TVs and all that sort of thing going, and to watch other hockey games if they're playing, or whatever's, football, or whatever's baseball, whatever's going on at that time. And I was sitting with my friend at the time, my roommate, and we'd just gotten dinner, and there was a voice behind me said, "Do you mind if I join you?" It was Scotty Bowman. So, like, in my best professional, I was like, "Sure, please sit down." But inside, I was like a little girl. I was jumping up and down in my head and all that sort of thing. But you're right. It's guys like Lamoriello and Scotty Bowman. They walk in a room and the room goes quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
I mean, I'll be honest too. I've been very fortunate enough to have Frank Mahovlich here, Ronnie Ellis. We developed a good friendship with Bobby Bond before he passed, and when these guys walk in here, and I just had probably the most incredible phone call just a few days ago from Dave Keon, who's in town this weekend, and I'm hoping he had mentioned to me he really wants to try and stop in, and you know, when they come here and they start talking, um, you know, I feel like I don't even belong in my own house. Like the way
Yeah.
they present themselves, it's incredible. Like you know, you just can't get enough of it. And you know, it's having Mahovlich down here. Like I said, even Ali Afredi, when he comes in, he starts talking Rick Vive, Jim Gregory, one of the Maple Leaf legendary management part of management. One of the last places he came in public was here, and like how fortunate were we to have him here. And but when you listen to them talk, it's just you shake your head sometimes and you say like, how am I honored enough to even be a part of this conversation right now?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you're aware, there's a friend of mine. His name is Barry Shelley. He
Mhm.
has your room, but for minor hockey and amateur hockey. It's called the Rink of Dreams. If you get a chance when you're fiddling around on Facebook and, stealing memes like the rest of us, stop by and check out Rink of Dreams and check out that group. There is some very cool cats in that group.
Yeah, Barry and I
And
are friends. Yeah, Barry and I are friends. I've seen it, and we have never met in person, but I'm very honored to call him a friend, and I
oh,
love
me
watching
too.
what he does. He's a great guy and a great person, and yeah, like and by all means too, if anybody wants to follow, I've got social media. I've got Toronto Maple Leaf guy on Instagram, and I'm always trying to post pieces of memorabilia and trying to explain some of the history and share it with people. It's not to show anything off. It's literally just to try and show people different history so we can help educate and keep this stuff going. I love it. I think it's great when people share things with me, and I know there's a lot of people that like seeing the different items. It's not, you know, this is another thing. I get calls from people saying my collection's nothing like yours. It's not a competition. You know, everybody's story is different. Everybody's collection is different, and everybody's most valuable piece may not be worth much to you know, dollars wise, but it's worth a ton to them sentimentally. And that's what I try to explain to everybody. It's not a competition. It's just we're literally just trying to share our story and keep it going. I just happen to want to use mine for what I think is a very important cause, and other causes like we talked about a couple minutes ago.
Yeah. And with that, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us today. My guest has been Mark Fera. And Mark, we're going to catch up this weekend at the Hall of Fame inductions and the weekend that is. And I will talk to you off air to set up what we're doing and how if we can get together. And I got to tell you, I'm a little jealous that you're going to be hanging out with Dave Keon. He is one of my want tos that I would love to interview, and I'm going to track him down and see if I can get him for an interview. I don't really want to delve too much into the bitterness that happened with the Leafs thing. I want to talk more about the Leafs highs that he had and the love that he has for the team, as opposed to, wow, that was lightning.
I was going to say, I just saw your whole screen.
Holy darn. But anyway, I want to thank you for taking part with us. This has been a chat with the Toronto Maple Leaf guy, Mark Fera. Mark, thank you very much. We will get back in touch with you again very, very soon because we have a very important subject we're going to talk about on a very special edition of the Chat With. But in the meantime, I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you had a good time. And whatever you do, if you can't be handsome, be handy and keep your stick on the ice, as Red Green would say. Take care, be good, love you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.